All right, well, good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for the Small Business Town Hall. We're extremely excited and pleased to have with us today Mr. Ashley Bell from the Small Business Administration for today's collaboration and for providing information and resources for small businesses that make up the Augusta community. Additionally, I want to thank our panelists who are here with us on today. We're joined on today's town hall by Ms. Sue Parr, President and CEO of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce. We also have with us Jay Forrester, Regional President, South State Bank. And from our local university, Augusta University, Dr. Richard Franza, Dean of the James M. Hull College of Business at Augusta University. I also want to welcome to the town hall members from the Augusta Commission who are listening in on this afternoon, and in particular, Commissioner Hassan, who asked that we schedule a session like this to connect our local businesses to helpful resources in addressing the challenges that many of them are facing as a result of COVID-19. I also thank each of you who are attending by way of our Zoom conference town hall. This wouldn't have been possible without the quick action of our Chief Information Officer, Mr. Mika Allen, and Mr. Jeff Lewis. Our webinar is being recorded today and will be available for review and for those of you to share. A link will be placed on the City of Augusta's COVID-19 webpage, also our social media sites, and made available through our partner sites. You can also check my Facebook later this evening for a link. For those of you who may have questions, we have a Q&A button that you can click. That's located at the top of your screens. If you have a question that you'd like to pose to any of our panelists, if you'll simply post that question by way of the Q&A, and we will take those questions at the point in time of our question and answer and pose them to the appropriate panelists. Those questions, again, can be submitted while we're going through the speaking portion of it as well. Again, we are excited to have with us our regional administrator from SBA, Mr. Ashley Bell, with an update on federal programs and the response to COVID-19. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ashley Bell.
Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. Thank you so much for hosting this event. This is just an extraordinary time, and we're fortunate to have extraordinary leadership in Augusta that is helping people find the resources they need to not only deal with the health crisis, but also the economic crisis that we've been susceptible to because of this virus. You've been a good friend for a long time, and I know that all of us around the state have always admired your leadership from afar and up close, as you ask us to travel to Augusta as many times as you have to spend our time and our treasure there. And we will continue to do so when this is all over. We're all saving up money to come spend it in Augusta. So we're excited about that because we know the future is going to be bright. We know we're going to get through this. So let's talk a little bit tonight about how we do that. Let's figure out how we come together. How do we use these resources? And I know that we've seen a challenge, and challenges like this will exacerbate some pre-existing conditions in your health and also amongst underserved communities. Many times, underserved communities are left behind. And so that's why I think it's important to have leaders like Mayor Davis, who've always had a heart for the least, the last, and the left behind. And today we can really focus on how all of us can take advantage of these resources to do our best to help out each other, to help out our businesses, our nonprofits, and our churches to put us back on a track to prosperity and enjoy again what we had before, which is the greatest economy this country's ever seen. So let's talk about the two major programs that SBA has. And I want to dive into the emergency disaster program first, because that one was the first to come on board. And the emergency disaster program has more applications, 3 times more than PPP, because that was the first rolled out. That was the first addition out. And so what did that mean? What does that mean? Georgia was declared a disaster by my office, working with the governor of this state, Brian Kemp, at a very early stage. The governor worked diligently to make sure that we could identify businesses that had been hit. And so early in March, mid-March, around March 13th, Georgia was declared a disaster by SBA, meaning these funds opened up. So there was a flood of applications, and we're currently working to make sure with this new money that Congress gave us that all of you who have applied will get a response back from SBA shortly and soon. And we hope that the SBA District Disaster Office will have all the resources it needs going forward to continue to process those loans. Those loans are important because they allow you to get low interest loans for up to 30 years amortized, which means you could go on the SBA.gov's website and apply for that loan, and you can, take care of all your expenses for your business at a low interest rate of 3.75 for your business, 2.75 for your nonprofit. Now, the PPP program, because I want to leave time for some questions, but I want to talk about how important that program has been. We were able, working with mayors like, Hardy Davis and others, to help people find access to capital and put $9.1 billion back into the Georgia economy in 14 days. That means that there's $9.1 billion in our economy right now that was not there 14 days ago, that is paying the salaries and the wages of Georgia workers that would not have happened otherwise. So that's important. Over 50,000 Georgia businesses took advantage of that program. So that's great. But we had more to do. There was more work to do. We know that we didn't reach deep enough, thoroughly enough into the parts of Georgia that are underserved. And that's traditionally why they're called underserved, because resources somehow, some way always reach their last. So we have to figure out how to fix that. And we think we did a really good job this second go around by identifying the best ways to do that. And that's on two fronts. One, recognize our economy isn't what it was 20 years ago, or 10 years ago. We all know that you probably heard, if you have attended any chamber meetings, the Georgia Chamber has been talking about this under leadership of Chris Clark all over the place, that we have a gig economy. People have gigs now. They have multiple opportunities to make income throughout the week. And the gig economy, the millennial entrepreneur and otherwise, they bank differently. Many of us, when we could get a haircut, may pay our barber using a Square. If you had to catch a taxi cab or buy something at a flea market or a festival, you're sliding your card on a small little white Square, and that may be how you get your money. It goes into a bank account. You'll use it that way. PayPal will give you a credit card. You can get the money from PayPal and turn right back around and use it. So we realized that and said, a lot of people just aren't walking in a bank anymore, a traditional bank, and using that as their main way of banking. And a lot of people that do that are from underserved communities. So we allowed now Square, Cabbage, which are fintech companies that you can do point of sale transaction with. You can actually get a PPP loan now from them. So if you have a Square or you have Cabbage or you use the online apps, many of those apps now will allow you to get your payroll protection loan directly from them. They know exactly how much money you're making. They know you just as well as any big box or big traditional bank would be able to. So the second part of that is that we realize that if you really want to dig deep and you want to reach these communities, you're going to have to invest more in smaller banks. So we separated the funds. And so now $30 billion of what was allocated is going to go to small banks with under $1 billion worth of assets. And that's critical. That's critical because now you have a separate pot of money that's going to go to your credit unions, your small banks, your CDFIs, your CDCs. Many of these are mission-based institutions that not only are just small hometown banks, but they're also banks that are working at serving women and minorities, that are the banks that our churches go to when they look for building funds or getting a mortgage for nonprofits. They're critical. They're absolutely critical to us being able to come out of this stronger than where we were. So this money is flowing directly to them now, and I think that's important as well. So how do you access these funds? You have to go in, you have to work with the banker. Now, I can tell you that many people will say that, look, actually, I don't have a relationship with a banker, and that's true for a lot of people. So what SBA is doing is we're creating a running list, a list of where we're keeping tab on all of the current banks that are participating in our program, that have access to capital, and we're asking them a couple questions. Are you taking new clients? Are you taking independent contractors? Are you taking sole proprietors? And are you taking churches? And so I think that last question was even more critical. under the leadership of Vice President Pence, for the very first time in the SBA history, we're now allowing churches to participate in PPP or any SBA program. We've never allowed churches to do that before under any administration but this one. So what we're doing is we're allowing churches to come together and apply as though they are a for-profit business. That means if you have a 501c3, you can apply for PPP, or if you're a church. Now here's the interesting part. Let's say you're a new church. Say your church just started up, and let's just say you have not yet gotten your 501c3 certification letter. You don't need it. You just have to make sure that you're holding yourself out as a church and abiding by 501c3 rules as anyone else would, such as not being political and that sort of thing. So that's an important move, because that has increased the number of business of opportunities for people to take advantage of this. And a lot of people say, well, why churches? And here's the reality. Churches serve a tremendous function in the social fabric of our community. Worship service aside, they're offering daycare service, vacation Bible school, drug addiction classes, marriage counseling, all sorts of social services. Many times the governments can't pay for it. Churches are offering it. And their employees that are professionals that are offering it are also being laid off, just like it would be at any business. And so this gives us an opportunity, as the doors of the churches have been open to us, and now we will open our doors to them at SBA and at our lenders across the state of Georgia. So that's very important. So as we see the second round of PPP ramp up, and we've hit a peak, and we're almost running out of money. I think, my best guess is sometime next week, this thing may come to an end. So if you haven't gotten a part of this yet, you want to make sure you call your local banker. If you don't have that, you can call SBA, and we can give you a list of banks that are still participating, that hopefully we can help you find someone that way. It's incredibly important to be ready. Information is powerful. Please make sure you apply soon, and hopefully going forward, the EIDL portal will be open, so you can continue to apply for the EIDL loans on the SBA disaster site to make sure you're getting the resources you need for the long haul to inoculate your business next time, if this happens again, to make sure you're ready. So Mayor, I'll open it up for any questions that you may have for me or your audience. And again, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. We appreciate that so much. You shared some things with me that I was not aware of. I guess that's what the challenges are when I'm no longer a millennial. I use Square, but Cabbage I'm not familiar with. So I'm sure Jay's going to tell us all about how those things work, though. But again, thank you so much for that. Let's do this, if we may. Let's pause and have our Q&A session towards the end. That way we can direct the questions to each of our panelists, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this point, I'm going to share just a few comments with regards to what we've done in Augusta and a general update. Currently in Augusta, from a COVID-19 perspective, early on we launched our response and recovery task force. In Augusta, we have had 399 confirmed COVID-19 cases. I want to share with our general public, those that are here, that if you have any symptoms and need testing, call the state of Georgia's COVID-19 hotline at 1-844-442-2681. Per Governor Kemp's order, we're seeing a reopening of the local economy. And I want to remind everyone that opening the economy does not mean that we should return back to the things that we refer to as normal. There's still a dire need for us to physical distance ourselves and also to maintain the CDC guidelines as it relates to cleanliness, washing of hands, and those things. I want to encourage everyone to continue to take the coronavirus seriously and to follow the guidance of our both local and state and federal health professionals. Last week, the Augusta Commission voted to fund the local program to support local small businesses. The guidelines for the program are under review by our city's attorney and will be announced and available shortly. The intent of the program is to provide immediate short-term relief needed to strengthen our local small businesses and nonprofits that have been affected by COVID-19. The purpose of the small business loan process is to provide an immediate financial boost for a period of 2 to 4 weeks. We conducted a small business survey, and I want to thank our chamber president and CEO for her partnership and their partnership, and us doing that with some over 457 respondents that allowed us a window into the operations of our small businesses across the Augusta community. We're also working on a plan to safely reopen city buildings. The health and safety of our community, as well as our staff, of utmost importance to us. And we're working to ensure that we can address those things as it relates to sanitization, social distancing guidelines, and to implement best practices in our facilities, up to and including continuing to work from a telework perspective. If your business needs help to open safely, the Georgia Department of Public Health has partnered with Augusta 311, and you're able to call 311 and they will answer questions on how to operate safely and how to comply with the state's guidelines for reopening if you have questions. I want to again thank everyone for participating, those who are attending and have questions. And I also want to thank my staff who can be of assistance in order to help you get connected to additional resources that are mentioned today. If you simply call the office of the mayor, and we will be happy to point you in the right direction and or answer your questions for you. With that, I want to turn it over to our next panelist, Mr. Jay Forrester from South State Bank, our regional president. Jay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you setting up this call, number one, and I think it's very important to get the stakeholders involved and to discuss the issues that are facing small businesses right now, and appreciate Ashley Bell and the other panelists as well coming on and speaking to the issue. Couple of things, and I think I'll leave my remarks relatively short, because I think the most important piece here is getting to the Q&A that I'm sure will follow. But the PPP program has been, by and large, a really, really good success, despite what you hear in the media. Certainly, it had some challenges early on with round one and round two, but the funds are flowing. In this market, I know there's been several $100 million loaned out amongst all the banks and credit unions as well. So I know everybody's been working extremely hard to get the money out. I would imagine that most people that are on this call as a participant perhaps have not received funding at this point, or have questions about how to even start that process. So hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions. But you know, at this point, most, if not all, banks and credit unions are participating, and the funds are flowing, and the process is relatively smooth, assuming we get a complete package from the borrowers. So the primary way, you know, your local bank or credit union can help you right now is through the PPP program, because it is such a beneficial program that is a 1% loan over 2 years. If 75% of the funds are used for payroll, and there's a caveat that an additional 25% can be used for utilities or rent payments or mortgage interest. But as long as you use the 75% for payroll, not only are those payments deferred during the first 6 months, but the loan is forgivable, which is key. So it's by far the most beneficial program out there as far as terms to the borrower, as well as the potential for forgiveness. An additional way that your bank or credit union may be able to help you, again, PPP being the primary at this point with COVID-related interruptions, but I would also encourage participants to ask your bank if they have deferred payment availability, meaning if you've got a mortgage and you're paying monthly principal and interest, many banks, if not all, are allowing during this COVID situation for borrowers to request either interest-only payments or a full deferment of their payment for up to 90 days, and some up to 120 days. So a really good benefit to do that right now and to save some cash. That obviously doesn't change the fact that you owe the money. You'll pay it eventually, but it does provide some payment relief in the interim. Also want to encourage everybody to please communicate with your banker, whether it's requesting funding for the PPP or just to keep them up to date on what's going on. The key, whenever you get into a stressful situation or a cash flow crunch or whatever the case may be, is to communicate often and be straight up and forthright with what's going on, and the bank can help you a lot easier the earlier we know about the issues and the more we're informed on the front end. So regardless of who your bank is, I would encourage you to keep the open communication going. Be an advocate for yourself. I think there's probably some folks on the call that have applied or have expressed interest with a bank and perhaps haven't gotten a call back. And I can tell you the reason that is most likely is because the sheer volume of the numbers of applications that are coming through everybody's desk and everybody's office. You got people working from home, not trying to make an excuse, but there's just a volume that we've never seen before. So advocate for yourself. If you've reached out and hadn't heard back, keep reaching out. Go to the branch manager if you don't have a lender, or go to your favorite teller or customer service rep and say, hey, I haven't heard back. I need somebody to call me. Because I can tell you, speaking to colleagues in just about every bank here included, we want to help as many as we can. We don't want to leave any stone unturned or any borrower untouched. The loans we're seeing that we're doing, and this is across the board, all banks, some loans are $1,000. Some are $1 million, $2 million. So they truly are touching every size business, nonprofits as well. So definitely encourage you to advocate for yourself. And also, as you look for the future, as things hopefully return to normal soon, as you plan for your business's financial future, I would encourage you to use resources like the University of Georgia Small Business Development Center to help you do projections and to come up with a business plan that looks perhaps totally different than what it looked like even 3 weeks ago. Because I think the way we all do business will be different in the future, and that's a free resource that's available to everybody. So definitely encourage you to reach out there. And I'll cut it off there and hopefully save time for some questions at the end.
Thank you, Jay. That was fantastic. I really appreciate that. Our next presenter is Dean Richard Franza from the Hull College of Business, Augusta University.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for inviting me to participate with this panel. It's exciting to be with you all, and that we're looking forward, and how do we move forward out of where we are right now. So my role here today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of the economy. I'm going to talk about that using the numbers, then talk about what could happen. I don't think any of us have a crystal ball of what exactly will happen in the future, but what are some of the scenarios that might occur? And then you as small businesses, what can you be doing now to prepare for as we come out of this particular crisis situation? So just to give you some context of where we've been economically, for about the past 2 years, our gross domestic product as a country has grown between 2 and 4%, mostly around 2 and 3%. Last year it was 2.2% with 2.1 in the fourth quarter, and the Federal Reserve had predicted that for 2020 a slight slowdown to that. They were expecting a exactly 2% growth in GDP for 2020. As you all know, things were probably moving along at that rate until we reached early to mid-March, and the numbers are out for the first quarter, and our economy contracted. GDP decreased by almost 5%, 4.8% to be exact. And but the brunt of this, since it happened mainly in March, the brunt of this contraction is probably going to happen here in the second quarter, where predictions are being estimated at about 30 to 40% contraction in the second quarter. I'll talk a little more about what's expected, but we expect a recovery at some point during the year. And now some predictions are about 4% for the contraction of the economy in the year 2020. But to give you some perspective on that, in the year of the Great Recession in 2009, the contraction of the economy was 2.5%. So the impact is more significant than what we felt in 2009. From an unemployment standpoint, the unemployment rate had been hovering, between 3 and 4%. For most of the last year, we were at 3.5% in the end of February. By the end of March, it had jumped to 4.4%. And the estimate right now is that we're probably at about a rate of 15% unemployment right now. So that gives you the national perspective. Now focus on Georgia and Augusta. And I want to credit one of my faculty members, Dr. Simon Medcalf, provided me some information on both the state and Augusta. Georgia's been hit pretty hard from an unemployment standpoint, probably in the top 10 on most hit, with 216 claims for unemployment out of each 1,000 people in the labor force. But Augusta, these numbers are going to seem ridiculously high, but relative to the rest of Georgia, we're doing a little bit better. Augusta, see, unemployment insurance claims are up 778% in March, but that's the second lowest in Georgia. Our estimate of our unemployment rate in Augusta area right now is about 7.5%. I think the areas that are the information that we have, the areas that are hardest hit, the most obvious are leisure and hospitality, primarily in food and beverage, retail, and maybe surprisingly is healthcare. But again, maybe not so surprising in that things like elective surgeries and non-essential surgeries have been, and routine service, particularly like in dental offices, a lot of dental offices have closed because of this. I think part of the reason why we are doing better than most of the rest of Georgia is we do have big government pieces here in this area, DOE and DOD presence that are pretty large education piece. So again, the economy in Augusta typically buffets itself a little better than maybe the rest of Georgia, maybe some parts of the nation, but obviously nobody's escaping this. The more important question is what happens from here. So, and the issue is we obviously don't know. There are a number of different, so from a business perspective, we need to think about it in terms of different scenarios. There are a number of different scenarios out there on how the recovery or lack thereof might occur. There's a lower probability of what we call a quick recovery or a May reboot. I think that the probability of that is really low, but the rest of them, the shape of the recoveries are typically talked about in shapes of letters. So we talk about V's, W's, U's, and L's are the 4 letters. So the one we hope for most is a V, which again, the shape of the V is we've gone down really sharply, we're gonna recover sharply. And the most promising of these scenarios is the strong third quarter recovery, which puts us in really, really good shape by the end of summer. The W is recovery is we have one recovery and then there'll be some kind of reemergence of the COVID-19 in the fall, causing a second contraction and then also followed by a second recovery. Another shape that I mentioned was the U, which is more of a fall recovery. So it takes us longer to get to recovery, but the recovery is still significantly upward. Probably the worst thing that can happen is a lingering contraction or an L, which is where we hit bottom and then kind of flatten out. I'm not an economist, so I'll make that caveat right out of the chute, but I would say it has been thought that the most likely was the U. This is the most likely scenario to happen. We're hoping for a V, but trying to rush the V, and this is one of my concerns, I hope it doesn't happen, but if we try to rush with the return too much, looking for a V, we may more likely end up with a W or at worst case scenario, an L. So recoveries, most of the prognostications are for a recovery and a significant one. The question is not if, it's more of a when and how. So last thing I'd like to touch upon is, what do you do? How do you prepare yourself for this recovery? Because the recovery is coming. At all businesses and small businesses, I'd say my first piece of advice is take care of your people first. And that means your employees and your customers. Because in every one of those scenarios I presented, except the L, we're expecting a strong rebound in the economy. So if we're going to have a strong rebound in the economy, you're going to have to be prepared to capture demand, meaning satisfy your customers, and you're going to need good employees to meet that demand. So the most important thing at this point is, if you can continue to engage your employees and engage your customers, I think you're best to take advantage of the recovery. There's no single strategy here, because again, all of those scenarios I presented each associate a different probability of them occurring. So no single strategy will work for each of these scenarios. You've got to think about what works for you in each of those scenarios. But I will give you some basics that I think you should think about. Going in, as we enter this recovery, I think customer safety is number one. I'd say secondly, cash is king. If you can protect your cash, do so. But, and again, this is going to sound a little contradictory, but you're also going to have to spend some of it to keep your employees and to attract your customers. So, but you have to manage your cash appropriately so you're viable when the recovery comes. And part of that is really position yourself for that peak arrival. If you have happy and trained employees, you've been working on improving your processes during this downtime, and those processes are now safe, speedy, and efficient, provide value to your customers, you got a much better chance of coming out the other side. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll pass it back to the mayor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dean Franza. And with that, we will go to our President, CEO of the Chamber, Ms. Sue Parr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Director Bell, thank you for co-hosting this forum today. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to participate and to share a little bit about what is happening with 1,200 businesses and organizations that are members of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate the opportunity to share some insight. When I think back to March 16th, we launched basically 3 initiatives at the Chamber. Our first initiative was to reach out to every single member of the Chamber. So I'm proud to say that our membership team has actually reached out on a one-on-one basis with over 90% of our members to gain the insights that we need to really develop the community. Our theme is achieving more together today, and we do that as a community. We also have been very busy sort of adjusting and being able to push out actionable intelligence for a lot of our small business members especially. It's very important with all of the noise that the Chamber is providing that service. And so we have spent a lot of time distilling information so that our members can easily be able to pivot, adapt, change on the things that they need to be in the immediate future. We have been spending a lot of time advocating for our members, whether it's working through issues with essential workforce, working through other issues, whether it's PPP supplies. So there's been a lot of moving parts and pieces, and even at the policy level, working with our state, local, and federal government elected officials to make sure they understand the decisions that they're making and the impacts of those decisions on our local business community. I wanted to share today some insight that we have gained of how our members are staying connected, how they're not just staying connected to their existing customers, but thinking about what those potential customers look like. I really appreciated what Dr. Franza said about staying active in your business and keeping your employees very motivated and very functional, working on projects that when you do reopen, you will be very well poised for that, and hopefully be able to get that the loan forgiven that if they have a PPP loan. I think that the last part, in terms of who is speaking for my business, I really do appreciate what Mr. Bell said about the PPP program. As I have talked with our members, one of the most significant areas that I think that we need to really continue to focus on, and I appreciate so much the leadership of Mayor Davis and the to the fact that we have sole proprietors. These are bootstrap businesses, they're veteran-owned businesses, they're women-owned businesses, they're retailers, they're B2B, they're B2C, and while we have had a lot of relief in the pipeline, someone still needs to be speaking up for these very small businesses that, again, they don't have the banking relationships, they, again, bootstrap their business on personal finances and credit cards. They feel very uncomfortable even walking into the banks. I appreciate what Chris Clark says about the gig economy, but these are people that struck out on their own. They're entrepreneurs. They have talents. That's how they started their business, and we really need to make sure that we are focusing on these people. I have been saying it for many weeks to anyone who will listen, and Jay can attest to this as one of my bankers as past chairman of our board of directors. We have relied heavily on him and other bankers in our community to really help us, understand how we can bridge those communications between the lenders and, again, the sole proprietors, the smallest businesses in our community that will be swept away unless we are able to help them. So I hope as we continue the discussions on as Dr. Bell spoke of, or Mr. Bell spoke of, the PPP loans, especially with the CDFIs, and, carving out some of those funds for the distressed areas, for the minority businesses that we can really accomplish that. So again, very important. I want to talk a little bit about the networks. We have been in hermetically sealed networks, and as a business, who is used to, working in multiple networks, we now find ourselves in these virtual networks and really fish out of water. And how do we manage these networks so that we can continue with our business, continue to stay in touch with our customers? And I think one of the first things that we try to tell our members is, for 10, 15 years, we've had social media, which is one of your most powerful networks, and a virtual technology network. I go on too many Facebook pages of our business community, and all they're saying is that they're closed. These businesses really need to be running pictures of, if they're a hairstylist, run some photos of some of your clients. If you're a restaurant, post every day and tell people that you can't wait to see them back in your restaurant. If you go completely dormant, it's going to be much more difficult for you to come out on the other side. So one of the most important things is to keep up your social networks. We've also seen a lot of traction and a lot of positive result from competitor peer networks. Interestingly enough, those are networks that you don't usually, your sphere of influence doesn't usually include your competitors. But I will tell you right now that between restaurants and other similar sector companies actually talking to each other, learning best practices, it can be very, very advantageous for you to reach out to your competitors. Start small Facebook pages, share ideas. This will help you get through these periods of time where you have very similar needs and interests. And, again, just having that baseline network of people that are just like you can be very, very helpful right now. And of course, there's our family and our friends and our churches and our faith-based organizations and our nonprofits. If you are not volunteering for a nonprofit right now, that is an excellent way to stay focused and networked and build your business. This is a great way to build your business. You've got the time, potentially, so you should be out there volunteering. And then the last thing is that we do live in a virtual world right now. which is why 6 weeks ago, we launched our Achieving More Together virtual network series. And we have accumulated, believe it or not, 10 library of 10 webinars. And I'll take you down through all the topics because I think there's something that's going to speak to everyone among those 10. These are all free. You can go to our website, augustametrochamber.com, and you can listen to them at your leisure between, maybe when you're teaching your children and really gain some insight. The first one that we produced was how to lead and manage a remote workforce. As of March 16th, I think virtually every business I knew that could deploy their workforce to home confinement did so. The technology companies were running crazy trying to get everybody hooked up so they could all work from home. Now that we're sort of tied into that, you still have a lot of businesses that are really interested in how I can keep my team productive in a remote fashion. So we did a webinar on that. It was very successful. Our next one was on tax relief. A lot of businesses have forgotten that if you have had employees that have had to be quarantined or their children have lost their daycare, employees, you can receive free tax credits, depending on certain things. So we encourage people to get with your CPAs, get with your attorneys. They can tell you a lot of information about tax relief. We've had, of course, a lot of webinars on the emerging loan opportunities. I think we were one of the first in the community to do a webinar on the PPP program, making sure that people knew that those resources and, of course, the EIDL program were available. We did a webinar on strategies for online marketing strategies. Again, getting back to the point, do not let your social media go into 30 days since you've posted. It is not a good sign because people will think that you're really closed, and we want them to know that you're going to be back in business very soon. We did understanding essential and non-essential business guidelines. When the first executive order came out from Governor Kemp, there was really a lot of confusion. A lot of businesses really didn't know whether they were in the executive order, whether they were essential businesses, non-essential businesses. And even now today that we're a little bit wiser and we understand that working environment, it still would be a great refresher for those businesses that even are now in a place where they could reopen, but they're not sure they should. And, again, some of those resources and tips that are available for them. One of the most favorite ones that we did was tips for working parents that are how to successfully homeschool. We had a panel of 4 people who are experts in virtual online academics. We had Dr. Melinda Cobb from the school district. We are in unprecedented times when working parents are doing their job and also taking care of their family at home. And it was just a remarkable panel of experts telling everybody to just take a breath and we will get through this, and talking about all of the resources that are available for students. But this has also shined a light on the Chamber's Digital Inclusion Initiative. For over 2 years, we have been working to advocate for students in the Richmond County School District that did not have home internet. And we've actually quantified that, which is to a large degree, sets us apart from other communities because we know exactly where these students live. And we know the neighborhoods that we desperately need more connectivity resources, whether it's devices or whether it's just internet service. So we're hoping that moving forward we will continue to be able to shine a spotlight on that. We also had 2 attorneys give us their best advice on how to avoid work-related or COVID-related claims. This is something that's becoming more and more apparent in the eyes of a business owner. Is if I start to bring my employees back to work, what are my liabilities? What are my weaknesses with that? So you have some businesses talking about they're maybe requiring releases. It's a very challenging time. So again, we wanted to have some attorneys give some really solid advice. Displaced workers, we have actually companies that are hiring right now, believe it or not. Sitel in the south part of Augusta is actually hiring about 400 employees right now because as we have shifted in certain segments of the economy, Sitel is a large customer call center. And as you can imagine, a lot of companies that rely on those customer representative services that are back-sourced and outsourced, they need the workers. And we have a wonderful labor pool here in the community that can fill that. We also did a really interesting program on business innovation. We've got a lot of companies, I know you've read a lot of them in the news, talking about how they have been able to pivot and adjust some of their business operations and process to actually create new products. Carroll Fabrics, which is a windows covering manufacturer here in the community, is now making face masks, and we'll probably continue to do so. We also had a program this week for nonprofits, specifically for nonprofits, how to adapt your fundraising strategies. We have a lot of resources right now with large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that want to help. We also have a lot of very local, gracious philanthropic dollars flowing in through the community foundation. So we wanted to make sure our nonprofits knew of the ability of that. And of course, we will continue with these programs twice a week. Next week, we are going to be talking about the residential and commercial real estate markets. We still see a lot of for sale and contract pending, and that is really good news for our real estate market. So again, our mission over the last 6 weeks has been to try to keep our members very positive, try to help them navigate, try to find them money, and again, basically provide a collection of information and resources that they can refer to. So moving forward, we're very interested in learning more about what businesses are going to need to return to work. We have a lot of, especially in our manufacturing sector, that are going to continue to do what they're currently doing, whether that is taking folks' temperature as they walk in the door, obviously keeping everyone physically distanced, and making sure that they are abiding by all of the CDC rules. But they also want to start understanding how they can gradually look to the future. We had an interesting call with our manufacturers last week. We've actually had a manufacturer who, through this process in trying to socially distance their working groups, they now have segmented some of their research and engineering departments into 3 different work groups that are working at different times of the day. And they actually are saying at this juncture that it has worked so well that they may continue to do that. We've had a lot of businesses say that, I never thought about offering telecommuting to my employees, but I think that we're going to develop a long-term policy for that. So I think, again, we're here to be a resource for our 1,200 members. We are very excited about the future, and we know that achieving more together, we will get through this together. So again, Mayor, Mr. Bell, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, President Parr. What an incredible opportunity for us to have this conversation. At this point, I'm going to ask Mr. Bell. I don't think we've lost him. Okay, Jeff, if you're listening in, if you can recapture Mr. Bell. I'm going to pose a question, and I think this certainly appropriate for both. Okay, Mr. Bell, you're back. All right, we've got a series of questions out here for you. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir.
We'll go to Mr. Bell and then Jay Forrester. Today, there's a question about communications regarding the EIDL program, and specifically, an individual has applied 4.5 weeks ago, and there's not been much information. Can you speak to that issue? And then, more importantly, there's a question about churches and the payment protection program.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the EIDL program is currently not taking new people, and the portal is closed so that they can manage the existing 5 million applications. And just to put that in perspective, the PPP program, as successful as it was the first round, had 1.6 million applications, while the EIDL program had 5 million. SBA has loaned out in the last 14 days more money than they've loaned out in 14 years. And so what we hope to do with the EIDL program not accepting new people is to speed up the staff that we have being able to process existing claims. So we're working on it. I think it's going to move a lot faster now. SBA Disaster Office is a separate organization that works closely with FEMA, and that office will make sure that now that we are not having incoming, that we can do make sure we can process more applications more quickly. So you should be hearing from them very soon.
Okay. And if you can speak to the issue with regards to, let's see here, that's a question related to churches. I think Jay may have responded to that previously. All right. What about churches that applied with large banks for the Paycheck Protection Program who have not heard from anyone? Do they resubmit through a local bank or bring it to wait?
You know, I'm going to give some advice here that's just very practical. You know, many of the large banks did not process a lot of those loans that were submitted. And so a lot of people were stuck having thought they applied because you may have submitted information online but didn't hear back, or if you did hear back, it was after the first round of money had been exhausted. If you have your money and you have your application for the PPP with a large bank and you have not spoken with someone personally at this point, I advise you to go to a smaller bank that is accepting new clients.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think, Jay, you want to speak to that as well. I think you kind of talked about that already. You want to lean in?
Yeah, I think, you know, the key question to ask is if you can get in touch with someone there is, do you have an SBA authorization number? And if you do, you're good. Your money's locked in. It's just a matter of getting it funded at that point. But as Ashley was saying, if you have not heard from anybody or you do not have an SBA authorization number, once you do get in touch with somebody, I would encourage you to apply somewhere else just in the interest of time.
And the key there, the trigger on SBA rules is that they have 10 days to fund you. So if it's been 10 days, even if they've told you you've been funded, if you have an E-Tran number, then you're good. But if you have, you know, because I've heard a lot of people get varying sorts of emails saying you're being processed, we're waiting on SBA approval, this sort of thing. If it's been over 10 days since you think you've got approved and you haven't heard anything, then you definitely want to pursue another option.
That's fantastic. And I think we may have one more question, and this is related to, and I'll pose this to you, Ashley. Is there a point of contact for the gig workers who need consulting and or services on which programs are available for the work through, whether that be a loan program or pursuing unemployment? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have multiple resource partners in Augusta area that work with you. At the local college, we have the Small Business Development Center. Many times I say these are free services, but they aren't free. You're taxpayers, so I consider them prepaid more so than anything. You can go to any of these SBDCs and you can find where they're located and their number and their email address at sba.gov, and you can go under Small Business Development Centers and find the ones in Augusta, as well as our SCORE office. Our SCORE are retired executives that live in your area that are offering their services to help you navigate these waters and process these applications. And many times there's other nonprofits as well that do help out small businesses. Your chamber and other folks work with a lot of businesses very closely to help them navigate and make smart decisions about the information that you're receiving.
All right, fantastic. And I think we may have one more question. Okay. All right, this question is for Dean Franza. And I believe the question may be related to who is first in terms of lowest increase. Miguel Lagoas, if you could pose that question differently, it's an incomplete question. If you could pose that question again, we may be able to get an answer.
Mayor, I think I could address based on what I saw of his question.
Okay, go ahead.
His question was, what were we second in? And we were second lowest in unemployment insurance claims in the state of Georgia of all the metro areas. I believe there are about eight or nine metro areas in Georgia, and we were the second lowest in terms of number of unemployment insurance claims. It was still very high in terms of increase. I said 778%, but that was, believe it or not, there were second lowest in the state. There were 4 MSAs, metropolitan areas, that had 1,000% increase or more.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks, Dean Franza. I'm going to pose our final question to both Ashley and Jay. And the question is, when will guidelines for the forgiveness application portion of the Paycheck Protection Program be released?
Well, I think that, the guidelines, your lender has those, and they'll have them with even more clarity in the next few days or so. But generally speaking, if you are a borrower, the key is to understand that the SBA has delegated authority to the bank. So that delegation means that the bank, by signing an agreement with SBA, is the decision maker when it comes to your eligibility, as well as the forgivability of the loan. The bank, in agreement with SBA, is going to be held harmless even if they make a mistake on the eligibility side or the forgivability side. And the reason is because we want to make sure they're encouraged to get the money out the door to those that are qualified. So the key for you is to make sure that you're able to follow the guidelines, and that is to make sure that you're spending the money in the appropriate ratio, that you're using 75% or more for employee benefits, that you're only spending it on authorized expenditures that you can show your bank, and to make sure that you're keeping people employed at the rate that you agree to keep them employed. And if you can do that, then I think that you'll be in good shape. I think your bank and your banker and that relationship is important. You want to make sure you're having a conversation with your lender to make sure they understand what your plan is, so there's no surprises at the end of their term, that they know what you planned on doing and you followed up and you were secure with that, with making those promises to the bank, and you fulfilled them. So I think that is the gist of where you need to be to make sure that the 100% of your loan is forgivable.
That's fantastic. That takes us to our last question. At this point, I want to just thank each of our panelists who have shared with us on today. That something has been said that's helpful to your businesses, those of you that have been on the webinar today. Whether you've remained open or reopened, I want to encourage all of our Augusta businesses to be encouraged. We're stronger together, and there's a community of people and resources to support you. Again, I want to thank Ashley Bell, our Regional Small Business Administration Director, Dean Rick Franza from the Hull College of Business, Sue Parr, President and CEO of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce, and Jay Forrester, Regional President of South. Again, thank you to those who have attended and to our panelists. At this point, we're signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Good to see everybody. Be safe. Stay encouraged.